All right, in preparation for Lab 4, Excel Lab 4, I'm going to show you how to do confidence intervals in Excel. Now there's a couple different ways to get to some different data analysis things and formulas that will show you confidence intervals, but I'm going to show you the way to do it using the formulas. This is another lesson or set of information that you can do using either the desktop version of Excel, which is what I'm in, or the web version. It should work either way because you have access to these formulas in the formulas tab, insert function in either version of Excel. So this should be doable in either place. What I have here is a list of data. I'm using an example here that looks like this. If we wanted to estimate the average cost of a sleeping bag, we can take a sample. So here they use a sample of 20 and they recorded the costs for all 20. And I'm just going to copy over this data into Excel. I'm also going to make note of the fact that they want us to use a 90% confidence level. So when I come over here, I just copied my numbers. If you would like to work this example along with me, feel free to pause the video, take a moment to type this list of numbers into Excel. And I noticed in some of my past videos, it was a little bit hard to see the Excel in the original view. I zoomed this in a little bit, so hopefully you can read those numbers a little bit better to just take a pause and type those numbers in. So that's what you need. You need a list of data to put into Excel to start with. From there, we know that for our confidence interval, we're going to need some sample statistics. The two sample statistics specifically we're going to need here are the mean and the standard deviation. So I'm just going to type a label for each of those. You can put those anywhere on the page. And the mean, remember for that one, there's a built-in function called average. So we're going to go into our formulas tab into insert function. We're going to type average, hit go. We'll find it on our list here. Usually it's the first one that comes up if you type it in correctly. And I taught you how to do this for Excel Lab 2, same thing here. If we want to find the average of a list of data, all we do is come over here and grab our list of data, get it in the running dashes. I just have these 20 numbers. There's nothing underneath this here. I probably should show you. Nothing underneath the 20 here. Okay, so I'm going to grab all 20 of my numbers. I don't need to put anything in the second box. That's only if I had another list of data I was trying to do at the same time. I only have one list of data. I just want the average of these. So I'm going to hit OK, and there's my average. So that is like our X bar, X with the line over the top. That's our point estimate, our sample mean. We're going to do the same thing for the standard deviation. We're going to go into insert function, just like how I have it abbreviated here for my label. That's how we type it in, STDEV. And we want just the regular one there. We don't want .p because that's a population standard deviation, and that's calculated a little bit differently than a sample. .s is okay for sample. Or just use the original one here. This assumes a sample. So we'll say okay to that. Just like with the average or mean, we're going to just grab our data over here. And it's going to calculate the standard deviation of our sample of all 20 of those numbers. We don't need anything in the second box. And there's our answer. Now, if your Excel is zoomed out, you might see a slightly different number here because you might see more of the digits. My box is just filling with as many digits as it can show because it's a little bit zoomed in. So it should look like something like this number. Even if you see more of the digits, that's fine. All right, and remember we can round it if we want to. I'm just going to leave it, but if you needed to round it, you can go to the home tab, and in here you can click to see however many decimal places you want. It'll round it as it goes, and it'll preserve your formula for you. All right, so that's where you're going to start with it. Just two old things, two old formulas that we know how to use. So here's the new part. When we do confidence intervals by hand, the next step is to calculate the E value, the margin of error. And that comes from taking the formula where we get a value from our table, a critical value. That's our confidence coefficient. And we multiply that by the standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size, n. So you can do that by hand, but this is the part that Excel is going to make a lot quicker for us. We can calculate the E value using a built-in formula, and it's going to do all of that for us without having to even use a table to look up a critical value. So we're going to go into insert function. We're back in our formulas tab. Insert function. We're going to type the word confidence, like confidence intervals. Now be really careful here. So they usually just use the first one on the list. This is one of those times where we're not going to use the first one on the list. The one that just says confidence or confidence.norm assumes that you have a population standard deviation, a sigma. What we have up here is an S, a sample standard deviation. And for that, we need to use the T table, not the Z table. So we want to find this confidence one here that's got the .T. That means it's going to use the T table as the critical values instead of the Z table. And that's what we want because we don't have a population standard deviation. We have a sample standard deviation. So we want this confidence.T. So be really careful that you pick that one. If you do have a case where you're working on like a problem in the homework or a practice problem and you do have a sigma, a population standard deviation, then you want to use one of these first two. It'll do the same thing. All right, so I'm going to make sure I pick confidence.T. Now here, the first thing it wants is alpha. Remember, alpha is the opposite of our confidence percentage. When you're doing it by hand, you also have to do alpha divided by 2 in some cases, depending on which table you're using, because you have to look at like the opposite of the confidence level split up into the two tails. You know, there's a little bit left over on both the left and the right. In Excel, it's going to do that for us. So we do not have to divide it by 2. We just put in the alpha. And if I go back to my problem here, remember I was using a 90% confidence level. So I can actually put it in like this. Alpha is the opposite of our confidence level. They are probabilities, and opposites and probabilities add up to 1. So I can do 1 minus 0.90. I can do 1 minus my confidence level as a decimal. So make sure you turn your confidence level into a decimal. And you'll see for over here, it'll calculate that alpha is 10%, the opposite of our 90%. So for 90% confident, we're 10% sort of, I call it my unconfident number, right? We're 10% possibility of error. So you do 1 minus your C value as a decimal, and that's what goes in the alpha box. Next up, standard deviation. That should be pretty self-explanatory, but what we're going to do is we're going to go over here and click on the box where our standard deviation is. Don't just type it in because you might round it inadvertently when you want to use as much of the number as you can. So we're just going to click on that box. And remember, if you made any error, say like in your data entry, and you have to fix it later, it'll automatically update these values for you. And then it'll automatically update this formula where we clicked on the box rather than if we just type in the number here. And then size here refers to your sample size. So in that case, that's like how many pieces of data you have. That's your n value. So we have 20 pieces of data. You just count. That's what we're going to put in this box. So again, all you need to find the E value is to do formulas, insert function, find confidence.T. Alpha is 1 minus the C confidence percentage as a decimal. Standard deviation, we click on the box where we had our standard deviation. And then sample size, here you type in a count of your n value. How many pieces of data did you have? All right, so when we hit OK, that doesn't give us our final answer for our confidence interval. That just gives us our E value. And again, you might see more or less numbers here. Like say I make these boxes a little bit bigger so you can see more values. Okay, I only had less numbers there because I'm zoomed in and my boxes are a little bit smaller than to fit the numbers, but it should be around this value if you're doing it along with me. Notice I have not used the mean yet. I didn't click on this mean anywhere in the formula. That's okay. We're going to use it next. So to finish up my confidence interval, if I do my lower confidence bound and my upper confidence bound, remember when you do this by hand, the last step to a confidence interval is to take your X bar, your sample mean, and subtract the E value, and then also add the E value. And we're going to do that. We need to do it in 2 separate boxes because you can only do one calculation at a time. So let's start with the lower number. Remember when we want to make Excel a calculator, we start with an equal sign. And then we're going to click on, make sure you click on the right stuff here. It's the mean now we're going to use. We use the standard deviation for the formula. The mean is what we're going to use. So we're going to click on X bar, and we're going to do minus the E value. That'll give us our lower confidence number. And up here, or in another box, we're going to do the same thing. Start with equals because we want Excel to be a calculator. We're going to do our mean, and we're going to go plus our E value. And that's it. From there, you can round these as needed to whatever decimal place you need to. You can report it in a sentence. So here, this would say, we are 90% confident that the average cost of a sleeping bag is somewhere between $72.55 if we rounded it, and $94.95 if we rounded it. Okay. So that's all there is to doing confidence intervals in Excel. It's pretty easy. It's a nice, helpful alternate method to doing it by hand. The quick run through of the steps one more time is put in your data, use the built-in formula average to calculate the X-bar sample mean, use the built-in formula STDEV, standard deviation, to calculate the sample standard deviation S, then use the confidence.t function, not just the regular confidence one, because we want it to pull a t table value. In that formula, we want to put in 1 minus our C percentage as a decimal. We want to click on, that's for alpha. We want to click on our standard deviation calculation for standard deviation, and we want to type in our n value for our sample size, the count of our data. That will give us not our final answer, but that'll give us the E value in lieu of doing that by hand and using a table and doing the E calculation by hand. And we want to finish by finding our final confidence interval by taking our X-bar sample mean and subtracting the margin of error E value and adding the margin of error E value. So again, we did that by making Excel be a calculator, starting with an equal sign and just clicking on our boxes that hold the X-bar minus the E and X-bar plus the E in a separate box. You have to do them in separate boxes because it can only do one calculation at a time. And then you can interpret this in the normal way. So I'll put it even in the video here. We are 90% confident because we use a 90% confidence level. And I just look back at the problem. This is sleeping bags, and we're finding the average cost. So that the average cost or population average or average cost of all sleeping bags, what we're doing is we're using a sample, these 20 sleeping bags only, to estimate what any sleeping bag would cost. That's the point of a confidence interval, is using a smaller sample to make an estimate about an entire population. That would be too hard to study the entire population. It's so much easier just to get a smaller sample and then get a range that you're comfortable saying the average is within. We're also not saying that every sleeping bag costs between these two amounts. You can see right on this list, there's some sleeping bags that are higher than $94. There's some sleeping bags that are lower than $70. Not every sleeping bag is going to cost between these two numbers. We're just saying if you took all of them together, some are going to be lower, some are going to be higher, and we're 90% sure, so we even still have a 10% chance we're wrong, that the average, so when we balance them all together, some higher, some lower, some right within the range, we're 90% sure that the average is going to fall between these two numbers. So to finish my sentence here, we are 90%, I wanted to put the word confident in there too. That's why you read it back to make sure you have the full version of what you're trying to say. We are 90% confident that the average cost of all sleeping bags is between the two numbers that we came up with. I'm just going to round them and give them a label of $, because this is in dollars. So it's between $72.55 and $94.95. So that's all there is to it. This should help you if you want to do some of your homework problems using Excel instead of by hand, and you want to just practice it that way. It's fine either way. And this will definitely help you to complete the Excel Lab 4 assignment, which is a similar process with obviously a new set of data. That's going to have you try several different confidence intervals and then kind of analyze what you noticed, compare them to each other, and think about what a claim might be in relation to what you came up with. So there's some written analysis part to it as well. I'll be definitely looking at your formulas, going to your formula tab and showing formulas to see that you used the built-in average, standard deviation, confidence, used Excel to be a calculator. I want you to do those things in Excel for the lab to practice it. And that's all there is for Lab 4. All right, one more lab coming up, Lab 5, and that video will be shared soon.